I need more than one. 5 words. That was all he said. An 8-year-old boy, 41 pounds, standing at a gas station vending machine at 12:41 in the morning. A rope threaded through his belt loops where a real belt should have been. 19 pounds gone from his body in 9 months, inside a state-licensed, state-inspected group home. He had walked 4 miles through timber country darkness to get here. He had spent 17 days building the evidence before he left. And what he placed on that vending machine shelf, before the night was over, would end 11 years of a fraud so clean, the state had inspected it 7 times and passed it every time. For 9 months the system had the license. One biker had the vending machine light. That made all the difference. If you believe a child deserves more than paperwork, subscribe and tell me what city you're watching from. Drop it in the comments below. Stay with me. Arlo James Fitch, 8 years old. Standing at the vending machine alcove on the south wall of the Petro Express fuel stop on Highway 7, 4 miles south of Jasper, Arkansas. He had walked out of the tree line on the east side of the lot 60 feet back. Not hesitating. Not stopping. The decision had been made in the trees. The walk was the commitment. His body told a different story. He moved the way a child moves when 9 months of 60% calories have turned every step into a calculation. Deliberate, slightly slow. Not the slowness of tiredness, the slowness of conservation. Like a phone at 4% battery doing only what matters. He was wearing a gray hoodie, sleeves pushed to his wrists, the cuffs frayed from being chewed when he was anxious. Beneath the left cuff, both wrists were visible in the vending machine light, and if you knew what to look for, the bones were too close to the surface. The particular thinness that doesn't come from skipped lunches, it comes from months. The rope was white. Utility rope, threaded through the belt loops of his jeans and knotted at the front. His actual belt had been taken on intake day, 9 months ago, for what the facility paperwork called safety reasons. He had worn the rope every day since. The end of it tapped against his thigh with each step. Tap, tap, tap. That soft, rhythmic sound was the first thing Cody Marsh heard. He was 52 years old, 6 feet, 223 pounds, heavy through the chest the way men get when they've done physical work their whole lives and never quite stopped. Scar tissue ran along both forearms. Wildfire burns from 2007, the year he left the U.S. Forest Service after 14 years on the wildfire crew. He ran a small engine repair shop in Jasper now. He rode for the Newton County chapter of the Hells Angels, and he had been riding this stretch of Highway 7 for 19 years. He had stopped at the Petro Express at 12:38 a.m. for coffee, heading back from a parts run to Harrison. He was at the vending machine making a second selection when the tapping sound reached him. He turned. The boy walked straight to the machine. Stopped 3 feet from Cody, reached into his hoodie pocket, and placed an empty granola bar wrapper on the vending machine shelf between them. The wrapper from a bar a trucker had given him 40 minutes earlier at a stop on Highway 65. Already eaten. Already gone. He set it down carefully, like a document. Then he looked up. Green eyes. Alert. Watchful. The eyes of a boy who had spent 9 months reading adults the way adults were supposed to be reading him. I need more than one. Cody looked at the wrapper, then at the wrists, both of them, bones visible in the vending machine light where the hoodie cuffs had pushed back. Then at the rope. He didn't move for 3 seconds. Then he pressed every button on that machine, 6 items, and stepped back against the wall. Hands in his jacket pockets. Not blocking anything. Just present. "Take what you need," he said. "I'm not leaving." He leaned against the wall and made himself into furniture. Gave the boy the machine and the light and 3 feet of uncontested space. What he didn't know yet was that he had just passed a test Arlo had been designing for 9 months. And that one item Arlo would place on that shelf before the night was over, not the food, the other thing, would still be sitting in a Newton County courtroom 2 years later. Arlo ate the first bar in 6 bites. He didn't look at Cody while he ate. His eyes went to the highway, to the tree line, to the far pump, where an idling semi sat dark and quiet. He was checking exits. Cody recognized the behavior. He had seen it in people coming back from places they shouldn't have survived. "You live near here?" Cody asked. "Group home, Cutler Creek Road." "How far'd you walk?" 4 miles. A semi idled at the far pump. Moths hit the fixture above them. The pine smell from the tree line 40 feet away moved through the diesel on a slow current of 38 degrees Fahrenheit air. "The kitchen locks at 7, Arlo said. Not a complaint. A fact. The way you tell someone what time the bus runs. "Every night?" "Every night. Dinner's at 6:30, 1 serving. He finished the second bar. "No seconds." Cody kept his voice even. "How long?" 9 months. "You tell anyone?" Arlo looked at him for the first time since the rapper. "I told the caseworker in month 4, he said. "Douglas was in the room. She wrote down that I was struggling with food anxiety since my parents' accident." He looked back at the highway. "I passed a note to a substitute teacher in month 6. She called Douglas. I lost outdoor privileges for 3 weeks." He paused. "An older boy told his aunt. She called DHS. Douglas showed them 30 days of meal logs. The boy got transferred within 2 weeks." He said it without bitterness, just sequence, a BCD. "So you stopped telling people," Cody said. "I stopped telling people who would tell Douglas." Cody looked at him. "And me?" Arlo reached into his hoodie pocket and placed something on the shelf between them. Not food. A piece of notebook paper, folded 4 times, the fold lines worn soft from being opened and refolded across many nights. "You don't know him," Arlo said simply. Cody didn't touch the paper yet. "What's on it?" 17 days ago, I heard him on the phone with his brother. I was up for water from the bathroom tap. The office door was half open." Arlo's voice stayed flat, the specific flatness of someone who has rehearsed something until rehearsing it no longer costs anything. "He said I was a medical liability. He said he'd file a transfer request. Documented behavioral issues, difficulty integrating, standard language." A pause. "He said the same thing happened to the web boy, and nobody followed up." A beat. "He said he had 31 entries in my disruption log, that nobody would take my word over 11 years of clean inspections." Cody picked up the paper, unfolded it in the vending machine light, read it once, then again, in careful, precise handwriting. A conversation. Verbatim. The date. The time, both speakers. At the bottom, the number 31 circled 3 times. The handwriting didn't shake. That was the part that stayed with him. The handwriting didn't shake. "How long did it take you to write this?" Cody asked. "I didn't write it that night. I memorized it first." Arlo looked at his hands, the knuckles cracked from months of dehydration, the wrists thin where they rested on his knees. "I waited 17 days to make sure I had the right numbers, 19 pounds. 31 entries. The web boy's name, the date and time. He was quiet for a moment. I needed it to be right. So when I told someone, there wouldn't be a reason not to believe it. Cody refolded the paper along its own lines, put it in his breast pocket. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My sister was 14, he said, not looking at Arlo, looking at the highway. When a group home lost her, Fayetteville. Case closed 6 months later, no resolution." He paused. "I've been filing inquiries with Arkansas DHS every year for 31 years. Comes back the same every time." Arlo was still beside him, watching. "You walked out of those trees tonight," Cody said, "and gave me more than 31 years of filing ever did." He looked at the boy. "You're not going back to Cutler Creek?" Arlo held the look for a moment. Then he nodded. One small, deliberate nod. Not relief. Confirmation. The math had checked out. "He files Monday at 9, Arlo said. "His regular DHS submission, every Monday." "What day is today?" "Friday. Saturday now." 53 hours. Cody took off his riding jacket. Not the cut, just the thermal riding layer, heavy and warm. He held it out without a word. Arlo looked at it. Then he took it. It reached his knees. He put it on over the hoodie without being asked, because he was cold, and because someone had offered, and because 8 years old still knows what to do with warmth when it costs nothing to the person giving it. Cody pulled out his phone at 1:04 a.m. One number. "Mac," he said. "It's Cody." A pause. Not surprise. Just waiting. "I need every brother within 100 miles at the Petro Express on Highway 7. Now." 3 seconds of quiet. "What's going on?" 8-year-old boy. Group home on Cutler Creek. Lost 19 pounds in 9 months under a state contract. Transfer request goes in Monday morning and he's gone." A beat. "We're not waiting on the state to sort this one out in their own time." Mac Brimstone Cutter, 57 years old, leader of the Newton County chapter, a man who had personally run 3 missing child searches that local law enforcement had abandoned, went quiet. Not the quiet of uncertainty, the quiet of a decision already made. "Say no more," Mac said. "We're coming." The line went dead. No debate. No questions about evidence, no concerns about jurisdiction. Just the sound of a man who had heard the words, 9 months, transfer Monday morning, and understood exactly what they meant in Newton County. By 1:11 a.m., calls were going to 4 chapters. Newton County, Boone County, Carroll County, Marion County. 118 cell phones lighting up in dark bedrooms and quiet houses across the Ozarks. Now, if you're already picturing 118 motorcycles roaring down Cutler Creek Road at 2 a.m., headlights blazing, engines wide open, I want to stop you there. That is not what happened. What happened was quieter, more deliberate. The kind of organized that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. Mac arrived at the Petro Express at 1:47 a.m. in a pickup, alone. He walked to the vending machine alcove, looked at the boy in the oversized jacket, and looked at Cody. Cody handed him the folded paper. Mac read it, refolded it, handed it back. "How many other boys in that house?" he said. 5, Arlo said. "All under the same arrangement?" Arlo nodded. Mac pulled out his phone, made one call, said 4 words. "All 4 chapters. Tonight." Within the hour, 4 men arrived at the Petro Express. Each of them a specialist. each of them exactly what the next 48 hours required. Tombstone was 59, former Arkansas State Police, 21 years in financial crimes. He could look at a falsified DHS meal log and tell you in 4 minutes exactly which entries had been constructed rather than recorded, the slightly too consistent ink. The pen pressure that never varies the way a real daily log varies. The meals that always rotate on the same schedule because they were typed once and repeated, not lived. He read 3 months of Douglas Hale's meal logs in 4 minutes. Then he set them down and said, "He's been building these for years. This isn't a man who made a mistake. This is a man who perfected a process." Copperhead was 46, former Newton County DHS caseworker who had left in 2019 after a case he flagged was buried. A child in a licensed facility. Repeated weight loss. 3 caseworker notes marked "under review." A supervisor who signed off on inspection passes without reading the supporting documentation. He knew exactly which supervisor had been approving Douglas Hale's paperwork for 6 years. "There is a woman in that DHS office," he said to Mac quietly, "who has been initialing these inspection reports since 2018. I raised a flag on a different case. Nothing happened to the case. Nothing happened to her." He paused. "She's still there." Spector was 41, quiet, methodical, handled documentation. His job was to get inside 74 Cutler Creek Road and photograph everything before Douglas Hale could stage a single item. Room 3. The locked kitchen, the padlocked pantry, the disruption log, the receipts. Dust Cloud was 35, the youngest of the 4. He would drive to Little Rock Saturday afternoon to find Devin Webb. Now 10 years old. In his 3rd placement in 16 months. The boy Douglas had referenced in that overheard phone call as proof that his system worked. Dust Cloud would become the first adult to ask Devin directly what had happened to him at Harmon Boys Group Home. And Ironside was 64, club elder. The man the chapter sent when a conversation needed to carry weight without raising its voice. His job was the DHS director's office. Saturday morning. Early. Cody sat back down on the vending machine alcove curb at eye level with the boy. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Arlo looked at him. "Your parents, how long ago?" "June," Arlo said. "Logging accident, Newton County. I was at school." He looked at his hands. "I had a dog named Sergeant. I don't know where he went." Cody breathed steadily through his nose. He didn't look away. He didn't offer anything hollow. "I'm going to tell you something," he said. "I need you to believe me if you can." Arlo studied him. "Try," he said. "By morning there are going to be people who know your name. People who know 19 pounds, 31 entries, Devin Webb, and Douglas Hale. By Monday morning, Douglas Hale is going to have a problem so much larger than a transfer request that the DHS filing is going to be the last thing on his mind." He paused. "But I need to know one thing. Did he physically hurt you? Or was it only the food and the locking?" Arlo looked at his wrists, at the cracked knuckles, at the healing scratch along his left jaw, 11 days old now, from a confrontation over food the disruption log had filed as a resident altercation minor. "Only the food," he said, "and the locking, and the log." Cody repeated the word quietly. "Only." It sat between them on the cold asphalt. "Yeah," Arlo said. "Only." The state of Arkansas was paying Douglas Ray Hale $2,340 a month per child to provide full-cost care. 3 meals, clothing, medical access, therapeutic support. That number was written into the group home contract. What it covered was written there too. Douglas received that payment for 9 months for Arlo James Fitch. He spent approximately $680 of it on the boy. The remaining $1,660 every month for each of his 6 residents went somewhere else. It had been going somewhere else for 11 years. 7 state inspections. 7 passes. Not because the inspectors were corrupt. Because the state policy required 72 hours advance notice before every visit. A policy that exists for legitimate scheduling reasons. And one that gave Douglas Hale 72 hours to unlock the kitchen, prepare real food, brief the boys, and present 11 years of perfectly maintained paperwork to someone given no reason to look closer. And now, armed with a folded notebook page, a set of falsified meal logs, and 4 of the most precisely skilled men in 4 Arkansas counties, Cody Marsh was about to give Douglas Hale the Monday morning he had been building toward for 11 years. Just not the one Douglas had planned. By 4 a.m., Saturday, the timber road on Cutler Creek was lined with motorcycles. Not at the gate of 74 Cutler Creek Road. Not on the property. Along the road in both directions. 50 yards back, engines off, headlights dark. 118 men standing beside their bikes in the particular silence that means something has already been decided. No chanting, no shouting, no movement toward the fence line. Just presence. The kind of presence that is, by itself, a statement. Newton County Sheriff's Deputy Earl Briggs drove past at 4:17 a.m. Slowed, rolled down his window, looked at the line of bikes stretching in both directions in his headlights. He pulled to the shoulder. Got out. Mac walked over. "Private citizens standing on a public road, Earl," Mac said. 118 private citizens. Briggs looked at the house at the end of the gravel drive. Dark windows. No movement. "What's in there, Mac?" "A licensed group home with 6 boys. One of them walked 4 miles to a gas station at midnight and hasn't gained a pound in 9 months. There's a DHS submission going in Monday at 9 that would make him disappear into the Little Rock system before noon." A long beat. "That's a DHS matter," Briggs said. "It is," Mac agreed. "That's why we're on the road, and not the property." Briggs looked at the bikes again, then at Mac. Then he got back in the cruiser. He drove slowly past the gate and did not call for backup. He did not call Douglas Hale. What he did, at 4:23 a.m. from the south end of Cutler Creek Road, was call the Newton County DHS emergency line and leave a message. "This is Deputy Earl Briggs. 6 children at the Harmon Boys Group Home. I'd recommend someone be here in the morning." He wasn't the cavalry. He wasn't the solution. But he was the first official in this story who, when faced with a choice, pointed in the right direction. Mrs. Loretta Finch was 58 years old, 19 years as the Newton County School District nurse. She had weighed Arlo James Fitch in September, 48 pounds, already below normal for his age, and submitted a referral to the group home requesting a follow-up medical appointment. It came back 7 days later with a note in Douglas Hale's handwriting. "Facility handles medical needs internally. Thank you for your attention." She submitted a second referral in December. Same response, same handwriting. She had filed a note in Arlo's school record. Told her supervisor. Her supervisor said, "If the facility declined 2 referrals, that's documented. We've done what we can." Loretta Finch had not slept well on Thursday nights since October. When Copperhead knocked on her door at 7:15 Saturday morning, she was already awake. She opened it, saw the Newton County patch, and said, "Come in. I've been waiting for someone to knock on this door for 6 months." She sat them at her kitchen table and produced, from a folder she had kept in her desk drawer since October, printed copies of both referrals, both rejection notes, and her September weight notation. 48 pounds in September, she said. The admission intake was 60 in June. That's 12 pounds in 3 months. Her voice was steady until it wasn't. I knew something was wrong. I submitted the referrals. When they came back declined, I was told the documentation protected the district. She looked at her hands flat on the table. Nobody used the word protect about Arlo. Copperhead set a notepad on the table. Tell me everything from the beginning, Mrs. Finch. She did. For 42 minutes. The number she gave him at the end, 48 pounds in September versus the 41 pounds Arlo now weighed, meant the rate of loss had been accelerating. The first 3 months Douglas had been careful. After the DHS visit in month 5, when the falsified logs held, the caution came off. Douglas had understood by then that the system wasn't going to catch him. He had been right, for 5 more months. Patricia Ann Morse was 44 years old. She had left Harmon Boys Group Home in 2021 after 7 months as house manager. No formal complaint. Douglas controlled the reference letters, and she had needed the reference letter for the next job. She had carried what she knew for 4 years, in the particular way a person carries something they should have reported. Not forgotten. Not processed. Just present. Sitting in the middle of the chest where it had settled the week she left. Spectre found her in Harrison at 8 a.m. She answered the door in a work uniform, keys in hand. "I know why you're here," she said. "I'm going to be late for my shift. Can you be quick?" "Were you aware of the food rationing at Harmon Boys during your employment?" She looked at the keys in her hand. "I told Douglas in month 3 that the boys were losing weight," she said. "He said they were adjusting to a structured meal schedule recommended by a nutritionist. He named the nutritionist. In month 6, I asked to see the nutritional plan in writing. He said it was proprietary, that the DHS contract protected his operational methodology from disclosure." She said the phrase proprietary operational methodology with the exhaustion of someone who had replayed that conversation for 4 years. "In month 7, I found a boy eating toothpaste in the bathroom, not because he was confused, because his stomach hurt from being empty." She looked up. "I left the following week. I wrote voluntary resignation, personal reasons, because Douglas told me that if I left under those circumstances, I'd never work in child services again." Her jaw was tight. He was probably right. "Would you be willing to provide a written statement?" "I've been willing to provide a written statement for 4 years, Patricia Morse said. "Nobody asked me the right question until right now." She called in late to work. She sat at her kitchen table for 2 hours and wrote down everything she had seen, in the order she had seen it, with dates and names where she had them. 11 pages. At the bottom, in the margin, 1 line outside the formal structure. He wasn't hiding. He was operating in the open with a license that told everyone there was nothing to look for. Spectre was inside 74 Cutler Creek Road by 9 a.m. Saturday. The inspection had been authorized under the Arkansas Child Welfare Emergency Review Protocol, a protocol that Copperhead, as a former DHS caseworker, New existed and new required no advance notice in cases involving active welfare concerns. While Spector worked through the house, Ironside sat across from Newton County DHS Director Gerald Whitmore with Cody's folded notebook paper on the desk between them. Whitmore was 51 years old. Career bureaucrat, not corrupt, just overwhelmed and inclined for 11 years to extend professional trust to a man who gave him no obvious reason not to. Ironside placed the notebook paper on his desk, then Tombstone's meal log analysis, then Loretta Finch's 2 declined referrals. We have a man at 74 Cutler Creek Road who has been submitting a DHS package every Monday morning for 11 years, Ironside said. We'd like to know what that package actually said, and what was done with it. Whitmore picked up the meal log analysis, read it for a long time. When he set it down, he was quiet in the way a man is quiet when he understands he is looking at something that happened under his signature. Not his fault, not his crime. But his signature was on the inspection approvals. His office had received the monthly submissions. His office had flagged nothing. He reached for his phone. Inside the house, Spector photographed room 3. Every cot, every drawer. The shared dresser, 5 drawers, 1 per boy. He photographed the kitchen, the padlock on the exterior of the door, the combination lock on the pantry interior with Douglas's personal snack supply, crackers, trail mix, canned goods, coffee, all inaccessible to the boys behind a combination only Douglas knew. He photographed the meal log binder on the office desk. 38 months of entries, each day showing 3 full meals per boy, caloric totals consistent with state minimums, a nutritional variety that bore no relationship to the $680 Douglas actually spent on food each month. Then the behavioral disruption log. A blue binder. Organized by resident name. Arlo James Fitch's section was the longest current entry, 31 items. Devon Ray Webb's former section had 28. Spector set the disruption log in front of Tombstone, who had arrived behind him. Tombstone opened Webb's section, read for 90 seconds, looked up. Then he laid both binders side by side on the kitchen table. Read Webb's July entry, he said to Copperhead. Then read Arlo's July entry. Copperhead read. Went still. Identical, he said. 18 phrases, Tombstone said. Word for word. He looked toward the hallway where Douglas had been standing. A real daily log never reads the same across 2 different children in 2 different years, because real days are different. Only a template stays the same. He closed the binder. He wasn't keeping records, Tombstone said. He was building files. Douglas Ray Hale was in the kitchen making breakfast when the knock came. Standing at the stove, on the other side of the padlock he alone could open, in a flannel shirt and reading glasses on their cord, a pan of eggs going, a mug of coffee already poured. He heard the knock and said, "Just a minute," the way a man says it when he is mildly inconvenienced by the timing. He opened the door to Copperhead, Spector, and 2 Newton County DHS emergency review officers. He looked at the DHS lanyards. The reading glasses came up on their cord, settled on his nose. "Morning," he said. "Is this a scheduled review? My notification window?" "Emergency welfare review," one of the officers said. "No notification window applies." The eggs popped in the pan. "Of course," Douglas said. He stepped back, opened the door wider, gestured them inside with the gracious ease of a man who had done this 11 times and survived it every time. "Come on in. Boys are still sleeping. It's early on a Saturday. I let them rest in." He smiled. "I'll just take this off the heat." He turned back to the stove, moved the pan, set it on a cold burner, put the spatula down. He was performing calm. His hands were slightly too controlled. He was recalibrating, reading the room, looking for the shape of this visit, trying to identify the gap between what they knew and what he needed them not to find. When he turned back around, Tombstone was standing in the hallway with the food purchase receipts spread across the kitchen table. Douglas looked at them. The smile didn't change, but his hands, held loose at his sides, closed once, opened again. "I've been doing this 11 years, he said, the weariness settling into his voice, the performance of a good man who was used to being misunderstood. "The state doesn't pay what it costs. I make up the difference every month." "How much does the state pay you per resident per month?" Tombstone asked. $23.40. "And how much did you spend on food last month for 6 boys?" Douglas's lips pressed together, briefly. "I'd need to pull the receipts to give you a precise—" "I have the receipts," Tombstone said. He placed them on the table, one by one. $680 in February, $674 in January, $691 in December, 6 boys, 30 days, state contract for full nutritional care. Each month placed down like a card. You were paid $14,040 in food and care allocation over those 6 months. You spent $4,075. Douglas looked at the receipts. Then the smile did change. Not much. Just at the corners. The warmth left it, and something else moved in. Not panic, not guilt, but the recalibration of a man who has run the calculation and found the exit missing. "I have a supplemental purchasing system through a local food bank," he said. "The receipts don't capture." "Name the food bank," Copperhead said. Silence. "The contact at the food bank," Copperhead said. "Name." Douglas breathed slowly through his nose. "I'd need to check my records," he said. "Your attorney will want to work on that answer," Tombstone said, closing the receipt folder. "Because the FBI is going to want to hear it too." The word FBI landed in that kitchen and sat there. Douglas looked at Tombstone, then at Copperhead, then at the 2 DHS officers in his hallway. The reading glasses came off their cord. He folded them in his hand. His posture shifted, no longer the gracious ease of the man who opens the door, but the stillness of someone calculating rapidly and finding no exit. "I want to call my attorney," he said. "You're welcome to," Tombstone said. "Before you do, we have the disruption log, the purchase receipts, the meal logs, a former employee's written statement, a school nurse's documentation, and a notebook page in a child's handwriting with a date, a time, and verbatim dialogue from a phone call 17 days ago." Douglas went very still. Verbatim dialogue. He was replaying Tuesday night. The half-open office door. 10:22 p.m. His brother Carl on speaker. The certainty, absolute, unquestioned, that the boys were asleep. "I want to call my attorney," he said again. Quieter. He didn't call his attorney, not yet. Instead, his shoulders dropped, not from defeat, not from exhaustion, from the specific, deliberate relaxation of a man who has decided to try the thing that has always worked. The smile came back. Softer this time. Warmer. "Look," he said. He opened his hands, palms up, a gesture so practiced it looked natural. I understand how this appears. I do. You come in here, you see receipts, you see numbers on a page, and it looks bad. I get that. He tilted his head slightly, the approachability signal. But I've been doing this work for 11 years. 11 years of taking in boys that nobody else would take. Boys that the state couldn't place anywhere else because they were too difficult, too damaged, too much for a regular foster family. He let that settle. I'm not a perfect operator. I've made mistakes. But what I've never done, not once in 11 years, is stop caring about these kids. He said it with the weariness of a man who has been misunderstood his whole life and has made peace with it. Tombstone let him finish. Then he asked one question. The Webb boy, he said. Devon Webb. What was his weight at transfer? A half-second. Barely visible. But it was there, a flicker behind the eyes, the charm slipping for exactly 1 second before the smile held. I don't recall the specific. The receiving facility does, Tombstone said. 43 pounds, 17 below admission weight. They noted significant malnutrition on intake. He paused. Same trajectory as Arlo Fitch. Same log entry language. Same transfer timeline. He looked at Douglas steadily. What are the odds of that? The smile stayed on Douglas's face. But it was working harder now. I want to call my attorney, he said. You mentioned that, Copperhead said. Call him. The FBI is going to want to talk to him anyway. FBI. The word again. This time it landed differently. Douglas was quiet for a moment, the calculating quiet, the kind that is actually very loud on the inside. Then the legal threat came out. You are conducting an unauthorized search of a licensed state facility, he said. His voice had changed, the folksy warmth gone, something harder underneath. My attorney will have this entire review challenged by Monday morning. You'll lose access to every document you've touched today. And I have a relationship with the DHS regional director that predates everyone in this room. He looked at the officers. One phone call ends this. The brothers didn't react. No flinching. No looking at each other. Douglas was speaking into a wall. You're welcome to make that call, Cody said from the hallway, where he had been standing quietly. Right after the FBI makes theirs. Douglas looked at him. At the patch. At the stillness of a man who was not performing anything. The legal threat hadn't worked. He knew it hadn't worked. He shifted. You want to know what this job actually costs? He said. His voice dropped. Something that was meant to sound like vulnerability. I lost my marriage to it. I lost relationships. I've spent my own money I saved for 20 years, keeping this facility running because the state doesn't fund what it costs to actually care for these boys. I gave my life to this work. He looked at the DHS officers. And I'm standing in my own kitchen being treated like a criminal. Cody walked into the kitchen, stopped 3 feet from Douglas. He said 7 words. I'm not interested in your reasons. Neither is he. He didn't have to say who he was. Douglas Hale looked at Cody, then at the table, the receipts, the logs, the duplicate disruption binders laid side by side. And something left his face. Not the smile. The smile had already gone. What left was the machinery behind it, the constant calculation, the performance of a man who had been performing for 11 years in every caseworker visit and every inspection and every Rotary lunch and every phone call with his brother, the performance finally exhausted, finally with nowhere left to go. His hands, which had been open and deliberate this whole time, closed. He sat down at his own kitchen table. He didn't say anything else. He just sat there, in his flannel shirt and his reading glasses on their cord, beside the cold pan of eggs, in the silence of a man who has finally run out of versions of himself to try. Then he asked for his phone to call his attorney. This time, they let him. He didn't call his attorney first. He called his brother, Carl. They gathered in the back room of the Petro Express at 3 a.m. Not the clubhouse, no time. Cody had asked the night manager, a man named Garrett, whether they could use the break room. Garrett looked at Cody's face, looked out at the parking lot, looked at Arlo sitting on the bench outside the door in the riding jacket that still reached his knees. "I've got coffee," Garrett said. "As much as you need." Tombstone opened his laptop on the small break table and pulled up the photos Spectre had sent, receipts, meal logs, both disruption binders, and started reading out loud. February, food receipts, $674 for 6 boys, 28 days. He scrolled. February meal log submitted to DHS, 3 full meals per day. Caloric totals, meeting state minimum. He paused. $674 to feed 6 children for a month. That's roughly $3.75 per child per day. State minimum is $14.50. Nobody spoke. Through the break room's small window, Arlo was sitting straight-backed on the bench outside, looking at the highway. Not sleeping, not looking in. Just sitting. An 8-year-old boy alone at 3 a.m. on an Arkansas state highway, completely still in a way that stillness should not be normal at that age. Copperhead looked at him through the glass, then back at the screen. "Keep going," he said, quieter than before. Tombstone kept going. Layer 2 took another 10 minutes. The financial trail, monthly deposits of $9,800 to $10,200 into Hale's personal account, consistent for 9 years. The 40-acre timber parcel purchased cash in 2022 for $87,000. A bass boat, April 2023, $14,300. A hunting cabin renovation, summer 2023, $22,400. A combined $123,700 in 18 months on a declared group home operator's salary. Mac looked at the numbers in silence. "How many boys went through Harmon Boys total?" he asked. Tombstone opened the resident records, started counting. The room held the specific silence of people waiting for a number they already suspected wouldn't be small. Outside on Highway 7, a truck passed. Then the silence came back. 41, Tombstone said. 41 children. Average stay 7 months and 3 weeks. Every one of them orphaned or in crisis placement. Children with no family advocates, no relatives filing inquiries, nobody to notice the specific weight trajectory that began in month 2 of each placement once Douglas decided the intake inspection window had passed. Mac stood up, walked to the door, opened it. "Arlo?" he called quietly. The boy turned. "You hungry?" A pause. The pause of someone checking whether the question had a catch. "I already ate," Arlo said. "I know. I'm asking if you're hungry." A longer pause, then very small. "Yes." "Garrett," Mac said it into the room without raising his voice. "One more sandwich." He closed the door, sat back down. "Keep going," he said to Tombstone. That was the moment Copperhead, The man who had left DHS because a case he flagged got buried, who had watched a child go unprotected and written a report nobody read, understood he was here partly for Arlo and partly for the child he couldn't help in 2019. He didn't say that to anyone. He just opened his notepad and wrote down the name of the supervisor who had been signing off on Douglas Hale's inspection approvals for 6 years. That was Layer 3. Tombstone found the folder behind the 2022 compliance documentation. Unlabeled manila. He carried it to the table. Inside, personal bank statements, and a second insurance document. Not for the group home. For a property in Boone County. In a name Copperhead recognized immediately. "That's the facility that closed in 2018, he said, voice flat. "The case I flagged before I left DHS. He looked up. The supervisor who signed the clean closure inspection. Douglas Hale was listed as operational consultant on their model. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, an engine turned over and cut off. He was teaching people, Cody said. Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. 41 children at Harmon Boys. How many at Boone County? How many other facilities? A man with a clean license and 11 years of experience wasn't just running one group home. He was running a methodology. Refined. Replicated. Taught to others who knew how to read the inspection system and use the 72-hour advance notice window as a tool. Carl Hale was 49 years old. He had known about the food rationing for at least 3 years. He was the voice on the other end of that speakerphone call. He was not a predator. He was a coward. The category of person in stories like this that is sometimes harder to understand than the villain himself. He hadn't done anything. He had also not done anything. When Dust Cloud knocked on his door in Harrison at 10:30 Saturday morning, Carl was watching college basketball. He answered in a recliner's worth of Saturday morning shape, and one look at the patch changed his face completely. Dust Cloud held up the notebook paper. Carl Hale read 2 lines of it and sat down on his porch step. "He's my brother," Carl said. "I know," Dust Cloud said. A long silence. "I should have—" "Yes," Dust Cloud said. "You should have." He sat down on the porch step beside him, not standing over him. Beside him. "What do you know? From the beginning." Carl talked for 50 minutes. He knew about the food rationing going back to 2022. The locked kitchen. The meal log system. Douglas had mentioned it once as paperwork the state never audits because they don't have the staff. He had never seen the disruption log. He had never met any of the boys. "I told myself it wasn't as bad as it sounded," Carl said. "When you're the brother, you find the version that lets you keep showing up for Sunday dinner." He rubbed his face. "The Webb boy. When Douglas told me about the transfer, I asked what would happen to the kid. Douglas said he'll be fine, they all end up fine. I let that be enough." He looked at Dust Cloud. "He's not fine, is he?" "Devin Webb is 10 years old and in his 3rd placement in 16 months, Dust Cloud said. 43 pounds at transfer. The receiving facility noted significant malnutrition on intake and closed the referral without tracing it back to Harmon Boys." Carl Hale put his head in his hands. "Write down everything you told me," Dust Cloud said. "Every conversation, every date you remember, every time Douglas told you something and you chose the version that let you keep showing up for Sunday dinner." His voice wasn't hard when he said it. It was level. That levelness, in some ways, landed harder than anger would have. He waited on the porch while Carl went inside for paper. Carl came back with a legal pad and a ballpoint pen. He sat down on the porch step again and held them in his lap for a moment without writing anything. "How do I start?" he asked. Start with the first time Douglas told you something that didn't sit right, Dust Cloud said. The first time you told yourself a version of it. Carl looked at the legal pad. 2021, he said. He called me one night, late, maybe 10. Said one of the boys had been telling his teacher he wasn't getting enough to eat. He laughed when he said it, like it was a funny story about a difficult kid. Carl paused. I laughed too. I said something like, "These kids will say anything." Douglas said, "Exactly." And we moved on. He wrote the date at the top of the page. The thing is, Carl said, he never said it plainly. He never called me up and said, "Carl, I'm not feeding these kids." It was always reframed as, "The system doesn't give me enough, so I have to prioritize. I'm doing the best I can with what I have." And Douglas has always been the kind of man who seems like he's doing the best he can. That was just who he was, who I thought he was. He was quiet for a moment. When did you stop believing the version? Dust Cloud asked. 2 years ago, Carl said. He told me about the timber parcel. $87,000 cash. I asked him where it came from. He said smart investing. He looked at his hands. I know what Douglas makes. I know what $41,000 a year looks like. $87,000 cash is not smart investing on $41,000 a year. He paused. I didn't ask again. I told myself I didn't want to know. He started writing. Dust Cloud sat beside him and said nothing. The college game was still going on inside, faint through the closed door, crowd noise from somewhere that had nothing to do with any of this. Carl wrote for 40 minutes. His handwriting got smaller as the pages filled, as if he were trying to get it all on paper before he found a reason to stop. At the bottom of the last page, he wrote one line that wasn't part of the formal statement. I should have asked again. He capped the pen, handed the pad to Dust Cloud without reading it back. Will it help? He asked. Yes, Dust Cloud said. It will help. Carl nodded. He looked at the closed front door of his house. The ball game still going, the Saturday afternoon still there, ordinary and unchanged. I need to call a lawyer, he said. Yeah, Dust Cloud said. You do. Special Agent Rachel Doss arrived at the Petro Express at 2:30 p.m. Saturday in a gray Toyota Camry. 44 years old, plain clothes, practical shoes. Nothing about her looked like FBI except the way she crossed the parking lot. Eyes already done reading the space before her feet touched the asphalt. She had kept her own folder on Douglas Hale for 14 months. She said so when she introduced herself. No preamble. I have a financial trail, she said. Irregular deposits, asset purchases, a clear pattern on paper. But to close the case, I need something that connects those deposits to actual food expenditures, which is what my DHS subpoena process has been trying to obtain since October. She paused. Still waiting. Cody looked at her. 14 months. 14 months. We had him out in 14 hours. Doss didn't explain herself, didn't cite due process or evidentiary standards or staffing constraints. She just nodded, a small, tired nod, the nod of someone who has been doing this long enough to know when the honest answer is that there isn't a good one. I know, she said. That was the right answer. Not because it made anything better. Because it was true. Cody laid out the evidence one piece at a time. Tombstone's receipt analysis. The meal log comparison. Loretta Finch's 2 declined referrals. Patricia Morse's 11 pages. The duplicate disruption log entries. The Boone County folder. Carl Hale's written statement. Last, the folded notebook page, placed face up between them. Doss picked it up. Read it. Set her pen down. She leaned forward slightly. Boone County, she said. That's the gap we haven't been able to close. We had Hale as a consultant on record, but couldn't establish what the consultation actually involved. She looked up. If there's a financial connection between his operational model and that facility's contract fraud, this changes the scope of the charges significantly. Copperhead, Cody said. Former Newton County DHS caseworker. He knows the Boone County case history and the supervisor who signed the closure inspection. Doss wrote the name. A beat. Do you have kids? Cody asked. Off script. She looked up. One, she said. 12 years old. She doing all right? Doss held his look for a second. Then, she's doing fine. Good, Cody said. Simply. No follow-up. Doss understood the question wasn't small talk. He was asking because every child in every case file was somebody's kid, and she had worked this long enough to know that reminding herself of that, not letting the case become just numbers on a spreadsheet, was sometimes the only thing that kept it from becoming exactly that. One condition, Cody said. She waited. Arlo Fitch gets a victim advocate assigned before any formal interview. Nobody talks to him about this case without him asking first. He paused. And Carl Hale gets picked up today, not after another week of paperwork. Doss stood, settled the documents into her bag. We'll be in touch, she said. Agent Doss. She turned. You do right by him, Cody said. A beat. That's the job, she said. She walked to her car. The system wasn't broken. That was the thing people kept getting wrong about cases like this. A broken system could be fixed. Find the crack, repair it, move forward. What Douglas Hale had lived inside for 11 years wasn't broken. It worked exactly as designed. It moved slowly because deliberate speed was a virtue when weighing the rights of the accused. It required documented evidence because proof mattered. It gave 72 hours notice before inspections because that was the policy, and the policy existed for reasons. Nobody built those rules to be cruel. They just turned out, with specific predators who had learned to read them, to cost children time they couldn't afford to spend. The brothers hadn't replaced the system. They'd bought the time the system needed to work, 14 hours versus 14 months. Not smarter, not more righteous, just faster. And on a Friday night in March, faster was the only thing that mattered. At 4:47 p.m. Saturday, Douglas Ray Hale was placed under arrest in the kitchen of 74 Cutler Creek Road. He was watching a ball game on the small counter TV when the officers arrived. The reading glasses were on. The coffee mug was in his hand. He had spent the afternoon calculating whether there was still an exit, and had concluded, sometime around 3 p.m., that there wasn't. He set the mug down carefully. No sudden movements. Can someone call my neighbor about the mail? He said. I'll need someone to pick up the mail. Not as deflection, as genuine logistics, as if the mail were, in that moment, the appropriate concern. Deputy Briggs looked at him. Sure, Doug, he said quietly. We'll take care of it. They read him his rights beside the stove where the eggs had been. They walked him out through the front door, past the gravel drive, into the mid-afternoon light. His work boots were clean, the way they always were despite the gravel. He looked at his feet. He did not look at the road. Charges. Federal contract fraud. Child endangerment. 6 counts, 1 per resident. Criminal neglect. Falsification of government documents. Theft of state funds exceeding $1.1 million over a documented 11-year period. Carl Hale was arrested in Harrison at 5:12 p.m. for conspiracy to commit fraud. The Boone County supervisor who had signed the closure inspection was placed on administrative leave at 6 p.m. Saturday by a DHS director, who was, by that point, no longer inclined to extend professional trust without verification. Bail was set Monday morning at $750,000. A man whose liquid accounts were now frozen as part of the federal investigation did not make it. He sat in Newton County Correctional that Monday while Agent Doss submitted his case file to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Little Rock. The DHS submission that was supposed to go in at 9 a.m. Monday, the transfer request, the 31 disruption log entries, the standard language that would have sent Arlo James Fitch to a facility in Little Rock before noon, was never filed. Arlo was not transferred. He was, instead, the first of 6 boys removed from 74 Cutler Creek Road at 8 a.m. Sunday morning by a DHS emergency placement team, with 2 Hells Angels riding escort. Engines quiet. Pace measured. No performance of anything except presence. He walked out the front door carrying 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, and the notebook from which the paper had been torn. He did not take the rope. Arlo James Fitch weighed 41.3 pounds when the pediatric scale at Newton County Medical settled. Dr. Sandra Okafor, 39 years old, 12 years in pediatrics, a woman who had learned to keep her face neutral when a number made her want to put her fist through a wall, looked at the reading, looked at Arlo, and wrote 3 words in his chart before she wrote anything else. Severely malnourished. Stabilize. Cody sat in the waiting room. He had brought something. A paperback from the Petro Express rack, purchased at 6 a.m. before the hospital run. Not a children's book. A book about the Arkansas Ozarks, geology, wildlife, timber history. He bought it because Arlo struck him as a boy who wanted information more than comfort. He set it on the chair beside him. In case. Doc, the chapter's former combat medic, quiet and precise, sat 2 chairs down, his phone face up on his knee, appearing to read it without reading it. Dr. Okafor came out at 10:20 a.m. His body has been in significant caloric deficit for an extended period, she said. We're starting him on a refeeding protocol. Small amounts, specific nutrients, carefully timed. His stomach has contracted. We can't simply return him to normal eating. It has to be gradual, or we cause more harm. She paused. He has early muscle atrophy in his legs, chronic dehydration, the knuckle cracking, the lip condition. His BMI is 12.8. Survivable minimum for his age is approximately 14.1. She let that number sit. He is roughly 36 days from a threshold I don't want to think about. Doc absorbed this without expression. What does he need from us? Cody asked. Consistent food, consistently offered, without consequence for not eating enough, and without pressure to eat more than he can. His body needs to learn slowly that the food is going to keep coming. She looked at her chart. He also told me, when I asked how he was feeling, that he wanted to know the exact medical name for what was wrong with him. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. Quieter than that. So, I told him. Protein energy malnutrition with secondary dehydration. He asked me to spell malnutrition. I did. He said thank you. She looked at Cody over the chart. Thank you, she said, for getting him here when you did. Doc was in the waiting room when Dr. Okafor finished with Cody. He had been there for 2 hours. He had brought, from his jacket pocket, a small bag of animal crackers, the kind from a gas station, cheap and orange, the kind a child could eat without thinking about it. He set it on the chair beside him when he sat down. Not for himself. Just there. In case. When the nurse came out to say Arlo was settled and could have a visitor, Doc went in first. He sat in the chair by the window. He didn't move the chair closer. He didn't ask how Arlo was feeling or tell him everything was going to be okay. He set the animal crackers on the bed rail, within reach, not pushed toward him, and said, "I'm Doc. I ride with Cody. You don't have to talk." Arlo looked at the animal crackers, then at Doc. "What kind of medic?" he asked. "Combat," Doc said. 3 tours. Arlo considered this. "Do people ask you what it was like?" "All the time." "Do you tell them?" "Depends on the person." Arlo was quiet for a moment. "I won't ask," he said. "I know," Doc said. "That's why I'm telling you. It was the worst thing I ever did, and the thing I'm most proud of, both at the same time. Some things work like that." Arlo looked at the window. "My parents died at the same time," he said. "Both of them. Same accident." "I heard," Doc said. "People keep saying I'm sorry like they did something wrong." He paused. "They didn't do anything wrong." "No," Doc said. "They didn't. I just wish—" He stopped. Started again. "I had a dog named Sergeant. I don't know where he went." Doc was quiet for a moment. "We can find out," he said. "If you want. There are people who can look into that." Arlo turned to look at him, the first time he had looked directly at anyone in this room since the scale. "Really?" he said. The word came out younger than anything else he had said since the gas station. 8 years old. Just 8. "Really?" Doc said. Arlo looked back at the window. He reached over and took one animal cracker from the bag. Ate it slowly. "Okay," he said. They found Sergeant 3 weeks later. He had been taken in by the neighbor who had been present the afternoon Arlo came home from school to news that changed everything. She had kept him, not knowing what else to do, not knowing who to call. He was a mixed breed, 7 years old, brown and white, with a habit of sleeping across doorways. He was brought to Maple Creek Road on a Tuesday afternoon. Arlo sat on the porch steps when the neighbor's car pulled up. He watched the back door open. He watched Sergeant climb out, look around, and then, with the particular certainty of a dog who has never forgotten a smell, walk straight to the porch steps without hesitation. He sat down next to Arlo. Arlo put his hand on the dog's back and didn't say anything for a long time. Ruth Caldwell watched from the kitchen window. She didn't go outside. Some moments are private even when they happen on a front porch on Maple Creek Road in full afternoon light. After a while, Arlo looked up. He wasn't crying. He was just sitting there with his hand on Sergeant's back, looking at the timber hills east of Jasper. "Okay," he said. To no one in particular. The same word. The same particular okay that meant, "This computes. I can work with this. I'm going to be all right." The brothers said goodbye on Sunday afternoon, outside the Caldwell's house. Dust Cloud came first. He crouched down to Arlo's level, not in a way that made himself small for the boy's benefit, but in the way people crouch when they genuinely want eye contact. He handed Arlo a card with his number on it. "Anytime," he said. "I mean it. Text, call, whatever. Anytime." Arlo took the card. "About anything?" "About anything." Tombstone shook his hand. Properly. The way you shake the hand of someone you respect. Arlo looked slightly surprised by this, then straightened his shoulders and shook back. Ironside was last. 64 years old, the elder. He crouched on one knee, looked Arlo in the eye, and said, "You did a hard thing." You did it right. Don't ever let anyone tell you it wasn't brave because you were scared while you did it. That's the only kind of brave there is." Arlo held his look. "I was scared," he said. "I know," Ironside said. "So was I, the first time I did something that mattered." He stood up. "Didn't stop either of us." He walked to his bike. Arlo stood on the Caldwell's porch and watched them go, one by one, back onto Maple Creek Road. The engines started in sequence, not dramatic, not performative, just the sound of men heading home after something that needed doing was done. The sound faded into the timber hills. Then it was quiet. Sargent was lying across the porch doorway. Arlo stepped over him and went inside for dinner. The first safe meal was soup, hospital broth, thin, warm, the mildest thing the refeeding protocol allowed on day 1. Arlo ate it in the pediatric room at 11:15 a.m. Sunday, in a bed with a real pillow and a blanket that was his and not going anywhere. Doc had positioned himself in the chair by the window, not near the bed, not over the tray. Just present, the way you're present when you want someone to know they're not alone without making it a demand. Arlo ate the broth slowly. He didn't watch the door. He didn't watch the tray like it might be taken. He watched the spoon. After a few spoonfuls, he set it down and looked at the window. "The kitchen unlocks at 7, he said. Not to Doc, specifically, just to the room. "Not this kitchen," Doc said. Arlo looked at him. "This one stays open," Doc said. "Nurse call button by your left hand. You press it any time, day or night. Someone brings you something to eat. That's the only rule." Arlo looked at the call button. Then he picked up the spoon again. The soup smelled like nothing in particular. Institutional, warm, faintly salted. The most ordinary smell in the world. In that room. The most significant smell in the world. Because the last time Arlo had eaten something warm without counting the minutes until the kitchen locked was 9 months ago, in a house on Birch Hollow Road, with 2 people who were no longer alive to know what had happened to him since. He finished the broth, set the spoon down. Doc didn't say anything. They sat in the warm hospital quiet, the winter light through the window, and neither of them needed to. The housing question was answered on Tuesday. Mac had spent Sunday and Monday working it with the specific methodical focus he brought to everything. He made calls, talked to people, asked the chapter what was available and what was possible. What he found was a foster family in Jasper, the Caldwells, Tom and Ruth, 58 and 55, who had fostered 11 children over 20 years and whose youngest had left 3 years ago. They had the license, the space, and when Mac called Ruth Caldwell at 7 a.m. Monday, the immediate answer: "How soon can he come?" The chapter raised $14,200 in 72 hours. 4 chapters contributing. The money covered medical costs not covered by emergency state insurance, a furniture delivery to the Caldwell's 2nd bedroom, and 1 item Cody bought himself, alone, at the Jasper hardware store Monday morning. A belt. Brown leather. Slightly too big for a boy who currently weighed 41 pounds, because a boy who currently weighed 41 pounds was not going to weigh 41 pounds forever. He put it in a paper bag without a note. Arlo would understand what it was. On Tuesday afternoon, Arlo James Fitch stood in the doorway of a bedroom in a house on Maple Creek Road in Jasper, Arkansas. Real bed, real dresser, real humbum. A window facing the backyard, where a bird feeder was mounted on a post and 3 sparrows were conducting a disagreement over territory. He stood in the doorway for a long time. Ruth Caldwell waited in the hallway behind him. Not crowding. "You can move things," she said. "If you want the bed somewhere else, we move it. It's your room." Arlo stepped inside, went to the window, looked at the sparrows. "Do they come every day?" he asked. "Every morning," Ruth said. 7:30. He nodded slowly, filed it away. The birds would come at 7. The kitchen would not lock. The belt in the paper bag on the dresser was his. He turned and looked at the room from the window side. "Okay," he said. "Not thank you. Not this is great. Just okay. The particular okay, that means this computes. I can work with this. I'm going to be all right." Cody, standing in the hallway behind Ruth, heard it. He turned and walked to the front porch, sat on the steps. He pulled out his phone. In a folder on it, labeled with 2 words that were his business and nobody else's, were photos, messages, saved case numbers. The annual DHS inquiry about his sister, filed in February as always, returned the same as always. He sat on the Caldwell's porch steps and looked at the timber hills east of Jasper and understood something he didn't quite have language for yet. That 31 years of filing hadn't been useless. That the refusal to decide a disappeared child was simply gone had kept something alive in him, a specific kind of attention, and that attention was what had made him, at 12:41 a.m. on a Friday, stop and look at a rope belt instead of past it. He didn't know where his sister was, but the boy inside this house was going to be at school on Monday. He was going to weigh more next month than he weighed this month. He was going to press a call button at 2 a.m. if he was hungry, and someone was going to bring him something to eat. That was not nothing. He walked to his bike. The engine started the way it always did, familiar, reliable. He pulled out onto Highway 7. The timber pressed in on both sides. The headlight carved its corridor through the Ozark dark. 3 months later, the rope belt was in an evidence bag in a Newton County courtroom. Not the focus of the prosecution. A detail in a larger case that now included 41 named former Harmon Boys residents, documented restitution calculations totaling $1.14 million in fraudulently retained state funds, and 4 federal charges that Douglas Hale's attorney had spent 11 weeks failing to negotiate down. But the rope belt was there. When the defense attorney asked Loretta Finch whether Arlo's weight loss could be attributed to grief-related eating disruption following his parents' deaths, she pointed at the evidence table and said, "His belt was confiscated on intake day. He wore a rope for 9 months. That is not a grief response. That is a controlled environment." The courtroom was quiet for a moment. The defense attorney moved on. 6 months after that Friday night. Arlo James Fitch weighed 54 pounds, not healed, not finished, but gaining, slowly, consistently, the way the body recovers when recovery is finally allowed. Dr. Okafor's most recent note contained one non-clinical sentence she would not normally include. "This child is going to be fine." He was in 2nd grade at Jasper Elementary. A desk by the window, which he had specifically requested. His teacher, Mr. Bowen, had been briefed by Loretta Finch and understood that a boy who counted ceiling tiles was not being inattentive. He was managing. The counting would stop being necessary when it stopped being necessary. Arlo had 2 friends, Marcus and a girl named Delia, who had lived on Maple Creek Road her whole life and had decided, after 2 weeks sitting next to Arlo at lunch, that he was interesting because he knew things about birds. He did know things about birds. He had been watching Ruth Caldwell's feeder every morning since March and had made a list in the back of a notebook of every species identified. 11 species. He was trying for a 12th. On a Saturday in September, the Newton County chapter held a cookout at the clubhouse. Not a formal event, just food, tables outside, the particular ease of a group of people who had been through something together and were on the other side. Arlo came with the Caldwells. He ate a hamburger without watching the food. He sat with Dust Cloud, who was explaining how motorcycle engines worked, not simplified, not condescending, just accurate. And Arlo asked questions with the precision of a boy who wanted to understand things correctly. Cody watched from across the yard. He watched Arlo hold the hamburger. 2 hands. Relaxed. No urgency. He watched him laugh at something Dust Cloud said. Short, genuine, and then gone, the way laughs happen when they're not performed. The boy was not healed. Healing doesn't work on a schedule. And anyone who has watched someone recover from prolonged institutional trauma knows the progress is not linear and the setbacks are not failures. But he was eating without watching the door. And that was the whole thing. That was everything. 2 years later. Patricia Ann Morse now works as a child welfare investigator for the Arkansas Department of Human Services. She applied in January of the year after Douglas Hale's conviction. She specializes in licensed residential facilities. She does unannounced visits. She has, in 14 months, flagged 4 facilities for irregular weight patterns in residents. 3 have resulted in formal investigations. 1 has resulted in a criminal referral. The methodology she uses, cross-referencing food purchase receipts against DHS meal log submissions, then comparing against school nurse weight records, is being formally adopted as standard practice by the Arkansas DHS Residential Review Division. The methodology did not originate with Patricia Morse. It came from Tombstone, who wrote it up in a 4-page document the Monday after Douglas Hale's arrest and submitted it to Gerald Whitmore's office with a cover note that said, "The gap between what a facility reports and what it spends is the whole investigation. Everything else follows." Whitmore implemented a pilot version 6 months later. Patricia Morse expanded it. The combination, a former house manager who knew what to look for from the inside, and an audit methodology that closed the 72-hour inspection window's blind spot, was described in the DHS policy brief as the most significant change to residential facility oversight in Arkansas in 20 years. Arlo doesn't know about the policy brief. He's 10 years old. He has other things to think about. But he was the reason for it. Every child who will be weighed and cross-referenced and protected by that audit going forward, their safety traces back to a boy in a rope belt who counted to 31 and memorized a phone call and walked 60 feet across cold asphalt to a vending machine at 12:41 in the morning and said 5 words to the right man. Patricia keeps a copy of the Tombstone document in her desk drawer behind her own 11-page statement. She reads it when the work gets heavy. It gets heavy regularly. She reads it anyway, 18 months after that Friday night. Arlo James Fitch made a decision on a Tuesday in September. He was 11 years old, 72 pounds, starting 5th grade at Jasper Elementary. He had been at the Caldwells for a year and a half. He had learned, in that time, that the birds always came at 7, and the kitchen was always open, and Sargent always slept across doorways, and Tom Caldwell made pancakes on Sunday mornings without being asked, and Ruth kept a specific kind of cereal in the cabinet that was Arlo's brand and nobody else's. He had learned, in other words, that some things could be counted on. The decision was this. He wanted to speak at the Arkansas DHS Residential Care Reform hearing in Little Rock. The hearing had been scheduled as a result of the Hale case, a formal legislative review of the 72-hour inspection notice policy, and the audit gap that had allowed 11 years of fraud to pass undetected. They were accepting testimony from former residents of licensed facilities. Arlo asked Copperhead to explain what testimony meant. Copperhead explained it. Arlo was quiet for a day. Then he told Ruth he wanted to do it. Ruth asked if he was sure. "I've been sure since I wrote that paper," he said. "I just needed to be old enough that they'd listen." He was 11. They would listen. Copperhead drove him to Little Rock on a Thursday morning in October. Cody rode behind them, not inside the building, not in the hearing room. Just present, in the parking lot, in case. Arlo sat at the witness table in a room with 12 legislators and a court reporter and a gallery of DHS officials and child welfare advocates and reporters. He was the smallest person in the room by a significant margin. He had written his testimony on a piece of notebook paper. The same brand, the same ruled lines. He placed it on the table in front of him. He spoke for 8 minutes. He did not cry. He did not perform. He stated facts in the specific flat cadence of someone for whom facts had always been more reliable than feelings, and for whom this particular set of facts had been assembled with great care over a very long time. He talked about the kitchen lock, the one serving, the rope, the 31 log entries, the caseworker who was in the room, the substitute teacher who called Douglas, the night he stood in the hallway for 4 minutes and 17 seconds memorizing a phone call because he had learned that emotion without evidence is just noise from a difficult child. At the end, he said, "I am not asking you to trust children more than adults. I am asking you to build a system where a child doesn't have to be as careful as I was just to be believed." The room was quiet for a moment. Then the committee chair asked if he had any questions. "No," Arlo said. "I have answers. You have the questions." The 72-hour advance notice policy was suspended for cause-based inspections within the following legislative session. The cross-referencing audit protocol, Tombstone's methodology, expanded by Patricia Morse, was codified into Arkansas DHS Regulatory Code 6 months after that. Copperhead was in the hallway when Arlo came out. He didn't say anything elaborate. He just put his hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. Arlo nodded. They drove back to Jasper. Sargent was asleep across the front door when they got home. Arlo stepped over him, went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and sat at the table with his notebook. He opened it to the species list. 32 birds now. He was working toward 40. He picked up his pen and added the one he had seen in the parking lot of the Little Rock Legislative Building. A cedar waxwing, which he had looked up on his phone during the drive and confirmed by the yellow tip of the tail and the red wing markings. 33. He kept counting. 3 years after that Friday night. Arlo James Fitch is 13 years old. He is 5 feet 1 inch, 94 pounds. Exactly where he should be, 48th percentile, a number Dr. Okafor noted at his last annual visit with something that, in a clinical setting, might be called satisfaction. He is in the Junior Naturalist program at Jasper Middle School. He has identified 37 bird species from the feeder on Maple Creek Road and the surrounding timber country. He is working toward 40. He tutors 2 sixth graders on Tuesdays after school. One of them, a boy named Isaiah, 11 years old, recently placed in foster care in Jasper, has the particular watchfulness Arlo recognizes from the inside. The eyes that go to food sources first when entering any space. The careful movement of a body conserving what it has. Arlo noticed it on the second Tuesday. He didn't say anything immediately. He helped Isaiah with the math worksheet. At the end of the session, when the other sixth grader had left, and it was just the two of them at the table, Arlo looked at Isaiah's wrist where the sleeve had slipped. Then he looked up. "Is there enough food where you're staying?" he asked. Isaiah went very still. "I don't know," he said quietly. "Okay," Arlo said. He pulled a notebook from his backpack, the same brand as the one from which a page had been torn 3 years ago on Cutler Creek Road. He wrote a name and a phone number and slid it across the table. "This person will listen," he said. "And what you tell him stays where you put it until you decide what to do with it." He didn't hover. He didn't push. He picked up his backpack and said, "Same time next Tuesday," and walked out into the hallway. Isaiah looked at the piece of paper for a long time. Then he folded it and put it in his pocket. Arlo had recognized the look. He had worn it for 9 months. He knew what it felt like from the inside. That particular combination of terror and hope and exhaustion. The face of someone who has been failed enough times to stop expecting anything, but hasn't quite given up yet. He had not walked past. Isaiah called the number on the paper that same evening. He called it from the bathroom of his foster home at 8:47 p.m., sitting on the floor with his back against the door, speaking quietly. The person who answered was Copperhead. He listened for 11 minutes without interrupting. Then he said, "You did the right thing. I'm going to make some calls tonight and someone is going to come see you tomorrow. Can you be home after school?" Isaiah said yes. The next day, a DHS investigator, trained under the new audit protocol, cross-referencing within 24 hours, confirmed what Copperhead had already suspected from 11 minutes on the phone. Isaiah was removed from that placement within 72 hours. He was placed with a family in Jasper, 3 blocks from Maple Creek Road. He and Arlo walked to school together on Tuesdays now, which was the day Arlo tutored. They didn't talk much on those walks. They didn't need to. They were 2 boys who understood, without having to explain it, that silence between people who trust each other is not emptiness. It is its own kind of enough. On a Thursday afternoon in November, Arlo was at his desk working on a naturalist report. 41 bird species now, 1 past his target, still counting, when he stopped and looked at the window. The feeder was empty. He had forgotten to refill it. He got up, went to the kitchen, filled the seed scoop, went outside in his socks because the refilling couldn't wait, and topped the feeder in the cold November air. Then he stood there for a moment, looking at the timber hills, the same hills he had looked at from the Caldwell's porch on the first day. He was not the same boy who had walked out of those hills 3 years ago. He knew more. He weighed more. He slept without listening for the kitchen to lock. He had a dog, and a friend, and a species list, and a testimony in the Arkansas legislative record, and a brown leather belt that fit now, bought at a hardware store by a man who had paid attention on a cold Friday night, when paying attention was the only thing required. He was not healed in the way people use that word when they want a story to be finished. He was healed in the way things actually heal, not back to what they were, but forward into something that works differently, that carries the damage as information rather than weight, that knows things the undamaged version never would have known. He went back inside. He sat down at his desk. He picked up his pen. 42 species. He had seen a common redpoll at the Caldwell's neighbor's feeder last week and had been meaning to add it. He added it. He kept counting. Cody Marsh still rides Highway 7. He stood at the vending machine alcove one evening in early October, 3 years after that Friday night. Not buying anything. Just standing there for a moment the way you stand somewhere that changed you. Not making ceremony of it, just allowing the place to be what it is. His phone had a message from Agent Doss, received that morning. Final sentencing. Douglas Ray Hale, 14 years federal, no parole eligibility for 9. Carl Hale, 32 months, suspended to 18 with mandatory cooperation terms. The Boone County DHS supervisor, 2 years suspended. Permanent bar from public sector employment. 11 years of operation. 41 children. $1.14 million in documented fraudulent retention. The Boone County facility's parallel operation, adding another $780,000 to the federal restitution order. He read the message twice. Put his phone away. The moths were hitting the fuel canopy light. They always did this time of year. The timber line was 40 feet from the east edge of the lot, the same dense dark it had always been, the kind that has no bottom at night. Somewhere in that dark, 3 years ago, a boy had been watching the lot for 11 minutes before he decided to walk out of the trees. He had calculated the cost, decided it was worth paying, walked 60 feet, and placed an empty wrapper on a shelf and said 5 words. Cody thought about his sister sometimes, in this spot. Not in the grief loop way he had thought about her for decades. In a different way now. The 31 years of filing hadn't been wasted. The refusal to decide that a child who disappeared into a system was simply gone. That refusal had kept something alive in him. A specific kind of attention. The kind that at 12:41 a.m. on a cold Friday in March made him turn toward a sound instead of away from it. He didn't know if she was alive. The 34th inquiry had come back the same. But 41 children who had passed through Douglas Hale's facility now had a federal restitution fund, a policy change, and their names attached to what had happened to them. And a boy named Arlo was at a school desk on Maple Creek Road tonight, probably with a notebook open, probably counting something, probably heading toward whatever he was going to become. That was not nothing. He stood at the vending machine alcove until the moths thinned out, and the night pressed close, and the pine smell moved through on the cold air. He had been thinking, standing here, about what it means to pay attention for 31 years and receive nothing back. Most people, he thought, would have stopped filing. Most people would have decided at some point between year 5 and year 10 that the filing was a ritual of grief rather than a genuine inquiry, that the sister was gone, that the case was closed, that the annual inquiry was something he did for himself rather than for any realistic hope of an answer. He had never decided that. He didn't know, standing here in the October dark, whether that stubbornness was wisdom or damage or simply the particular way his character had set after that summer in Fayetteville when he was 21 and his sister was 14, and the case closed 6 months later with no resolution. What he knew was this: the refusal to stop looking had kept something open in him, a specific quality of attention, not hypervigilance, not obsession, just the habit of noticing what didn't fit. A rope where a belt should be. A boy moving too slowly for his age. An empty wrapper placed on a shelf like a document. He had not saved his sister. He did not know if anyone ever would. But the thing that had kept him looking for 31 years had also kept him present on a cold Friday night in March for 60 feet of asphalt and 5 words and a folded piece of notebook paper that 41 children's futures had folded out from. He thought about Isaiah, 3 blocks from Maple Creek Road, walking to school on Tuesdays. He thought about Devin Webb in his first placement, staying. He thought about Patricia Morse reading the tombstone document when the work got heavy. He thought about Arlo at a desk with a species list, still counting, always counting, the boy who had learned to count things as a way to survive, and discovered, somewhere on the other side of survival, that counting was also just interesting. That the world was full of things worth counting, not because you needed them to get through the night, but because they were there, and they were real, and paying attention to real things was its own reward. He pulled out his phone, opened the folder. The 34th inquiry was there, same as the previous 33, status unchanged. He closed the folder. He would file the 35th in February. He walked to his bike. The engine started the way it always started, familiar, reliable, 19 years of the same road, the same sound, the same timber, dark on both sides. He pulled out onto Highway 7. He was a man who noticed things that didn't fit. He had always been. He always would be. And somewhere in the dark timber country of Newton County, on a road he had ridden for 19 years, that had always been enough to keep going, there is a plaque in the Jasper Community Garden on Newton Street, installed in the 2nd year after the case by the Newton County chapter and a DHS community liaison who believed in visible acknowledgement of invisible suffering. It reads, "For the children who asked for help in rooms where no one was listening, and for the people who chose to listen." It names Arlo James Fitch first, then all 41 former residents of Harmon Boys Group Home who came forward in the federal investigation. At the bottom, in smaller letters, Devin Ray Webb, who was found in Little Rock, and who is no longer in his 3rd placement. He is in his 1st. He is staying. If you have lived long enough to watch the systems that are supposed to protect people fail the people they're supposed to protect, and most of us, at some point, have, you already know the exhaustion that comes after. The fatigue of having seen it happen. Maybe having tried to stop it. Maybe having been the person who called the right number and was told the documentation was sufficient. This story is for you. Not to tell you the system is fixed. Not to tell you one case changes everything. But to tell you that the gap between the system's speed and a child's need is a gap that ordinary people can close. Not with motorcycles, necessarily. With attention. With the decision to look at the wrists instead of past them. With the willingness to ask a direct question, is there enough food where you're staying? And then wait for the answer. Arlo didn't need the world to be different. He needed one person to do the math. Pay attention to the rope belts around you. The things that should be one thing, but are something else. The children whose eyes go to the food before they go to your face. The ones who are too practiced at being invisible. They are not asking for miracles. They are asking for someone who notices. Subscribe if this story reached something in you. Share it with someone who needs to remember that protection doesn't always come from the places it's supposed to. And in the comments, tell me, was there a moment in your own life when someone chose to see you? Or a moment when you chose to see someone else? I want to know. I think we all do. Because every story on this channel begins and ends with the same belief. that the scariest-looking person in the room is sometimes the only one willing to do the kindest thing. A boy in a rope belt walked out of the Arkansas timber dark at 12:41 in the morning. He walked 60 feet to a vending machine. He said 5 words. And because one man was paying attention, had always been paying attention, for 31 years, in every filing and every inquiry and every night ride down a timber highway, those 5 words were enough. Take what you need. I'm not leaving.